So if I could share briefly.
Oh, hold on a second. Let me make you a co-host so you can share.
Sharing is caring after all. And I'll say welcome everyone, and thanks to these two guys for attending here. Hold on one second here. What did I want to share? It's actually these two guys. So welcome everyone to another meeting of the Bay Area Content Marketing Meetup. Thank you, Dennis Shao, for your leadership in this great organization hosting. And today we've got two great speakers. Joe Pulizzi, who is a four-time, this is his fourth time speaking to the meetup, a four-time offender. He coined the phrase content marketing, apparently, the godfather of content marketing, founder of multiple startups. Some of you know the Tilt, the Creator Economy Expo, and then, of course, founder of Content Marketing Institute and Content Marketing World. He's the guy on the left. The guy on the right in this photo, Brian Piper, is an author, keynote speaker, consultant, and director of content strategy and assessment at the University of Rochester. Go Yellow Jackets. I actually had to look up the mascot, but go get them. Brian has been doing SEO and web content optimization since 1996. And today they're going to tell us a little bit about their new book, Epic Content Marketing. It's the second edition. Maybe start off, guys, like, how did this book come about? And then I think we'll open up for Q&A today via the chat, or people can talk to you guys directly.
Well, first of all, I'm Joe. Thank you for having me. Thank you, Brian. I'm going to have you talk in a second, because you're really responsible for the reason why we're talking today, Epic Content Marketing second edition. And by the way, yeah, we did just celebrate was it the third anniversary of the last time I was on? Was that the third? Anyways, that was the last time I saw you folks in person, when we were all there together, which it was funny because we were all there. It was like March 6th or something like that of 2020. And we just had the conversation. Oh, Twitter just closed their offices. Something really weird is going on. Anyways, it was just all surreal, but happy to be with you today. I was actually on a Slack call. I think it was a Content Marketing Institute Slack. Was that right, Brian? And
yep.
You asked me a question because I was promoting my previous book, Content Inc., the second edition, because I'm into sequels these days. And you asked me the questions. You said, Joe, I know how much I loved Epic Content Marketing. I got a lot out of it. Are you ever going to do a second edition? And I haphazardly answered, yeah, I'll do it if you do it with me. Like, just, a flippant, like, whatever. This guy's not going to do anything with it. He emails me after that. And then we were talking. I'm like, hey, Brian, are you sure you want to do this? It's a lot of work, and I'm going to make you do most of the work if we do this. And you were all in. And then, unfortunately, Brian, you said you were going to do it. So you can take it the rest of the way if you want to. But is that accurate? Is that pretty much how it happened?
Yeah, that's exactly how it happened. And, my Epic Content Marketing, the first edition, changed my entire career path. And I was a unhappy website developer before I read that. I read it, immediately went down to our marketing department, told them they needed to hire me to do digital marketing because they wouldn't know what content marketing was. So, and then, a couple of years later, switched jobs, started at the University of Rochester. And within the first 2 weeks I was there, I convinced them to send me to Content Marketing World. That was 2017. And then every year that I went that year and every year after, I would track Joe down and take a selfie with him. And this is actually the selfie from 2017, the first year.
Is that the first one? Oh my God.
That's the first one. And that's where I told him every year I'd track him down and be like, thank you. This book changed my entire career path. I'm so much happier now. And so, when the Slack conversation happened and he made that kind of flippant remark, I was like, oh yeah, careful, I'll take you up on that. And then when I sent him I got off the call, I was like, oh, I gotta follow up on this. This might be a great opportunity. And so, he was right. It was a lot more work than I had expected it to be.
Well, I'll stop sharing. So, tell us a little bit about the book for those of us who haven't read it.
So the idea behind, I'll go to the first version and then the second version. And a lot of you, thankfully, for all your support, you read the first version. when this is 2000, go back to 2011, 2012. A lot of people don't know what content marketing is. We're just sort of starting to get our act together as a profession. People are talking about it, using it more as a term. And I really didn't think there was a textbook for content marketing. So when somebody said, hey, how do I document my content marketing strategy? And you guys know I would talk about that all the time. You got to write it down. You know, who are you targeting? What are you trying to do? How are you going to promote this thing? You know, what is the plan on making this thing happen? And there really wasn't anything out there. And I said, okay, I think there's a book there. So I wrote Epic Content Marketing. It did fairly well. And when Brian and I were talking about updating this one, I think, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong again, but we really thought we just needed to update okay, we know we'd have the AI. We got a little machine learning, you know, Brian's expertise is amazing content optimization. So thought we'd put some more in there, more on measurement, and thought it would just be like half of it would be updated. We'd touch it up a little bit, and then we'd add some new chapters. We had a whole section on Web3 and the creator economy and everything like that. And then I think it was I don't know, you and I started going through the previous book, Brian, and when we were getting the proposal together, and then I think we said, we've pretty much got to throw this thing out and start fresh because so much has changed. It's been a decade. What is that? Like 300 years in marketing? I don't know what that is. It's a long time, but we had to pretty much get rid of the whole thing and started fresh. Now, if you go through it, I would probably say that a solid 30% is pretty much as it was, outside of updating. You know, Google Plus isn't around anymore, and the SlideShare, is it still called SlideShare? You know, those types of things. But other than that, we really updated the whole thing. And the back half, probably from, what is it? I don't know, chapter 17 on, you tell me, Brian, but that is all brand new, where you get into AI, content marketing integration, the optimization stuff, machine learning, where we got into all the new tools added. Of course, there's been a lot of new tools since then. Had to take out the whole section on Google Plus, which broke my heart. And then the creator economy stuff. And then we added what if you want to buy a creator? And then we added a little bit, like, if you're a creator, what if you want to sell? So some of that stuff is all in there. And it's, I guess, what was the biggest change for you, Brian, from going through it? We added a couple chapters even last minute because we felt we were missing a few things.
Yeah, and it was really, even going through, and like at first we're like, all right, throw everything out. And then we started coming up with a new structure. And as we were going through the new structure, we're like, oh, well, all of the strategy stuff, all the, fundamentals about, finding your audience and all that, still all relevant, but the processes have been updated. So even talking to, Adele Ravel about how to build personas, they've changed their entire, paradigm about how they build personas now than what they had 10 years ago. So it was a lot more research than I thought it would be. I was like, I've been doing content marketing for 10 years. I know how this works. And when I was going through and actually figuring out what goes in the book and what comes out of the book, there were a lot of decisions to be made. And a lot of times I'd reach out to Joe and be like, does this seem right? And he'd be like, yeah, it looks right to me. So, but the new chapters, it was a, great back and forth of, this is your area of expertise. This is my area. We'll both cover these and integrate it together. So it was interesting working that way.
I think the biggest difference, Rich, and this is my favorite chapter, is the chapter that Brian did the interviews with Amanda at Cleveland Clinic. We have Aero Electronics, and we did, what was the third one? The case studies?
Cleveland Clinic, Aero, Salesforce. Sweet Farm.
And Sweet Farm too. And those blew me away, Rich, because we were very theoretical in 2012 and 13. We didn't have a lot of examples, like, how do you set up a content marketing organization on a large scale? There was no example at the time of anybody that done, besides, we always threw out the Red Bull example. So it's like, oh, great. Okay, Red Bull. But beyond that, what else did we have? And now, how Cleveland Clinic sets it up is so much different than how Salesforce sets it up. And then Aero did a whole, basically bought their way into 52 different brands and did it that way, and has the whole church and state difference. So there's not one way to do it. And that's what I love about the practices. Depending on the buy-in and the champions you have in your organization, you can set it up differently, and you don't have to do it just one way. But at least we have the examples now.
Right. Well, in those examples, then, make use of your introduction where you state your customers don't care about you, your products, or your services. They care about themselves. Right. So how do we, the marketers on the call, get customers to pay attention to us? Right. How do we, earn and keep and engage that attention? And here's this book, a wealth of advice. Is there any particular things you want to focus on that have changed since the first edition, or maybe focus on things that have remained the same? What are the constants?
Brian, do you want to start? Because the changing stuff was
Yeah,
like
I mean,
you
there were
really hit on a lot of
been
that.
a ton of change in the last 10 years. And it was interesting talking to so many influencers and experts in this field and figuring out what they thought the big changes were and how the technology and infrastructure has evolved and where it's going, what the future of content marketing might look like. But the thing that like Joe said, his favorite chapter was the interviews. I think mine was the communities chapter, because I mean, we can see it right here in this group of people that all get together. And it's this coming together and finding other people with similar interests and problems and issues and actually having these conversations. I think that's going to be a bigger and bigger part of any brand. And especially with all the AI content that's coming out, we're going to have a way to differentiate our brand and to connect with people in a human way. The best way to do that is community, and talking with Pat Flynn from Superfans and SPI, and talking with, David from Meetup, just fascinating insights into, how to build communities and how to connect and how to leverage your audience to grow that into a group of people who, feel this strong connection, and you can create these collaborations. And, I think there's a ton of opportunity around that. And I think that's one of the biggest changes that's going to keep moving forward and continue to evolve for us all.
And
Yeah.
I think, Rich, to answer your question about what has stayed the same. By the way, I see Brian and I both loved Google Plus. So that guy wanted to just throw that out there. We were paying attention. This is not a negativity. I wanted it to stay too. But fortunately, it's the biggest thing that stayed the same, which continues to amaze me, is there's still this thought that if we create all this content and throw it in every conceivable channel, that we'll do better than if we focus. And it's still absolutely, I mean, it's been that way for 10 years, and take it back to 100 years and take it back to Ben Franklin. It's still, if I focus on one particular audience, focus on one platform, what's my differentiation area? That has stayed the same for the last 10 years. And as we do more and more research and we look it up, and even with all the Rich, you mentioned the creator economy stuff that I've been doing, you want to build an audience today and you want to see change in behavior. That's why we're here, right? Content marketing is content created for behavior change in our organization. We're not selling something at first. What we're selling is we're trying to build attention and then a relationship. And that has stayed the same, where I think a lot of people still get into the rut of, we can do all these things, so let's do them. Instead of saying, no, we're just going to do the podcast and that's going to be our home base, or do the YouTube thing and be our home base. I throw out Content Marketing Institute research all the time, and they when they go and they look at it, it's the same stuff. It's basically an enterprise creates and distributes content 13 to 16 different ways. If we look at all the social media and webinars and events and everything, and that is the first thing when Robert Rose and I, we would, go in for these consulting engagements, they would expect us to make a recommendation on what things to create. Okay, you're the content guy. What are we going to do? And it's always, you're doing too much mediocre stuff. And it's very hard, right? I mean, you gotta get it. I've worked in big organizations and they all want to do the new thing. And you get somebody in marketing or even the CEO that wants to do the new thing or be on the cutting edge. And you have to say, oh, that's fine. And we can do that. And we can experiment with it. And absolutely we should. So let's put a little budget over here for experimentation, or maybe a little pilot. But long-term, that's not how we're going to build a relationship with our customers.
Yeah.
So that's what stayed the same. And I think that is going to continue to be the way we build audiences.
Yeah. Well, I think there's this, the bright, shiny object syndrome we talked about before, Joe and Brian, where, oh, there's this new thing, we have to do that. And or discretionary funds, use it or lose it money. You got to, rather than spread it thin, be in less places. Less is more. It's counterintuitive. Looking at the chat here, and again, I encourage everyone to chat in or raise your hand with any questions for Joe and Brian. Lori asked from the book, because we have a mix of attendees in our community here, some more experienced folks, some maybe a little new to content marketing. Lori asked, any useful tips from the book for newbies and or useful tips for a more advanced practitioner?
Well, for a newbie, this was set up and purposely set up that if you are a professor of marketing at a university, you could take this and have this be the textbook. So this would be your content marketing 101 textbook, if you will. So if you get content marketing, that basically, so you can read the book, start from, here's how you build the strategy, here's all the tools, here's why you would use them, here's how you measure this whole thing. We focus heavily, as you would imagine, on the subscriber, building a subscriber type of relationship, and then trying to measure the behavior change from that subscriber, whatever the goal is that you're going for. So that's all very basic content marketing 101. The new stuff would probably be around, and we spent a couple chapters on how do you really work with content creators and influencers as part of your content marketing strategy. I mean, I'm sure you'll all attest to the fact that the big drivers in each of your markets are not always media, right? And they're not always you or your competitors. They're individual content entrepreneurs, content creators. And there's an opportunity to work with them. There's an opportunity to partner with them. There's an opportunity to purchase them if you wish to buy those content assets. So we spend some time on that. That's a little bit more advanced. If you're content marketing 101, I wouldn't say you should make your hit list of people you want to buy necessarily at that point. But we set it up from the measurement table. We've got a couple good charts in there on measurement, on how to look at it depending on what your organization's goals are. So that's all there. And then Brian spent a good amount of time Web3, creator economy, integrating AI and content optimization. I would put that all on, you've been around the content marketing block a bit. I would probably split the book in half, and your second half of that book is probably for somebody who's trying to take the next level in content marketing. Brian, would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree. And I think, coming into it from a basic perspective, and anytime I go and consult with a new group, the first thing I always start talking about is, it's all in the first edition. It's in the Content Inc. It's everywhere you look for this. You have to know your strategy. If you can't start off knowing your strategy and having a content marketing strategy written down and laid out and knowing what your mission statement is, that's incredibly fundamental. So the information in those chapters talking about, how to find that, how to, examples of different companies and how they've come to that and figured out, that has to be the driving force behind any content that you create. Otherwise, you're wasting your time, because you're not driving your users towards taking any action that is going to help you reach your goals. And then on the more advanced side, one of the things that I see all the time is people are tracking all sorts of data. There's so much data that we have access to, and trying to figure out what KPIs really matter. And people always ask me, well, what should I be measuring? Like, well, what are your goals? What are your strategies? That's what you should be measuring. Anything that shows you whether or not you're making progress towards that. So I would say, on the introductory side, definitely look into the first part of the book, the strategy, the audience definition and personas. And then, the second half, all sorts of new technologies. But before you can really understand those technologies, even when you're integrating a new, a Web3 solution or blockchain, or you're bringing AI into your workflow, you have to have the data to know that if you're actually improving your workflow with AI. I mean, you may bring in an AI tool and everybody loves it because they're all, allows them to be more creative and come up with more ideas. But if it doesn't actually help you produce and reach your goals as a business, then you're wasting your time and your money.
Yeah.
And then Rich, I'm sorry, Rich or Lori, I forgot who asked that question.
Well,
I talked to a content marketer the other day that was having a real problem getting the team on the same page. And we realized just by talking through some things that they didn't have a content marketing mission statement of any kind, and they didn't review that on a regular basis. Very simple thing, right? Most of us have it somewhere, but do you review it with the team? And I basically said, look, I know you made one a long time ago when you started this thing. I would make it a habit of reviewing that with the team. Probably needs to be updated. Do all your writers, stringers, videographers, do they know what the mission is? Do you know who we're exactly targeting? Do you know what our differentiation area is, what our point of view is going to be? Do we know what we want the audience outcome to be when they engage in a piece of content? These are very simple 101 questions that, as you've been doing it for years and years, sometimes you don't want to, not want to say you lose your way, Rich, but you just forget to do some of these things because you're getting into what Brian talked about is, oh my God, I got ChatGPT, headache, and Web3 what? And you're just focusing on those when really, if we just did the basics, we'd probably be 75% of the way there.
Well, and Joe, Brian, what you just said really resonates. The fundamental start with what business objectives for your, do you think that content will help you achieve? And it might not. Content might not be the answer to whatever your business objective might be. Before you get into how to measure the performance of the content, did you engage the audience? Did they take whatever action was expected if you met their informational needs? Some kind of fundamental things there. I do want to get back to AI, but I have a question here from Mike Batot in the chat, and he prefaces the question. He just ordered a copy of your book. His question's around prospects, leads, buyers, users. Do you have a framework for thinking about creating and delivering content for each life cycle stage of the customer journey or ecosystem? I know they're not the same needs, but they generally share the same distribution channels. So talk to me a little bit about your book and then the sort of the content journey for an audience.
I'm going to have Brian take, because Brian really spent a good time on the segmentation and persona section. So I'm not want to put you on the spot, Brian, but if you want to talk a little bit to that.
Yep. So it's, critical first to define who your audience and, different pieces of content. Well, let me back up. From the university, we have a lot of different audiences. We have students, we have faculty, we have staff, we have all sorts of different levels of audiences within there. So whenever we're creating a new piece of content, we say, who's the primary audience? Because when I first started, I would ask our writers, well, who's the audience for this? They'd be like, everybody needs to know about this. I said, everybody is not an audience. That's not, you have to pick one audience that is going to have the biggest impact for our strategic goals by taking some action on this content. So first you have to define your audiences and identify each piece of content with the audience that is targeted for that. And then you also have to know for each piece of content, where does it fall in that funnel? Is it top of funnel? Is it, bringing people in? Is it the bottom of the funnel? Is it converting people and having them take, fill out a form or request information? So it's important to do that content audit up front to understand all the content you have, all the audiences that you're focusing on, and then all the stages of the funnel that you have content for those different audiences in. And then you can start looking, identifying where your gaps are, where are you missing content, where are you focusing too heavily on one audience for one area. And then if you're looking at your data for all that content, you can segment out your content performance data and look and see, where are people stopping? Where are my potential graduate students stopping in this ideal user journey that we have defined for them? Where are they not progressing into the next stage of the funnel? Let's figure out how to get more content in there, or take the content that we already have there and better optimize it with those calls to action to push them down into the next step of the funnel.
Good. Looking for any other questions? Thank you, Brian. Looking for any other questions I might be missing in the chat. Dennis, are you seeing anything?
I saw an interesting comment. I have to see whose name it was. It was the idea of taking the two books, first edition and second edition, and I know it's probably exceeds the buffer limit in ChatGPT, but asking ChatGPT to tell us the difference between the two editions, or what's changed in content marketing. Thought that was,
Yeah, I mean, I haven't done that specifically, but having made all those decisions and spent so much time looking through the book and figuring out what to add and what to update, I kind of have a pretty good idea. But it would be interesting to plug it into ChatGPT and see what it's come up with. But I use using ChatGPT for all sorts of data analysis and aggregation, so it's a great tool for that.
Well, curious about that. When did you put this book to bed? Was it like before or during the whole ChatGPT hype? Like when did you, what was your deadline for this?
We
so-
we caught the very tail end and had to actually update the chapters to include the 3 that came out. So
Okay.
it was kind of the last couple weeks. We're like, hey, we're gonna be a little late. Which they didn't seem to mind so much. And by the way, just so people know, when you publish with a traditional publisher, in this case with McGraw-Hill, it is slow. Like it's really, really slow. Brian and I put in the proposal and got the proposal accepted in December of 21.
Mm.
And so this book is published in March of 23. And we're all doing stuff during that. It's not like we waited, like we really started the process and whatever, but just to get, and really what that has to do is just their timetables and getting it in front of the sales team and working it through, because they basically work on a quarterly basis. So, I don't know, a lot of you probably are looking at publishing books, maybe as part of your content marketing strategy or whatever. So the positive for not using a traditional publisher is speed. Because to answer your question, Rich, it would have been a lot easier for us. And by the way, you can also, like, if you self-publish, and I've done this a few times myself, as soon as, if you're self-published and you're doing like a Lulu type of thing or an Amazon CreateSpace or whatever it is, you can update the book in real time, and that thing will absolutely publish out digitally or print, because you don't print, you're publishing on demand. So as soon as you upload that new manuscript, you're good to go. We didn't have that benefit whenever we put it to bed in October.
Well, we had to have everything. The first submission to the publisher was July, and then they did a bunch of editing. And then, yeah, I think end of October.
Final was October.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
Good. Going back to the chat, couple questions. Actually, Brian, to your comment on audit, a question from Heather Johnson. What do you have favorite tools for doing this sort of audit you mentioned? What do you use?
Yeah, so
recommend?
some of the big ones are Screaming Frog. That's kind of high level functional audit for Web Vitals, all those sort of information architecture is really good tool for that. And then, the biggest kind of section of any audit that I do, and my favorite part of the audit is the search audit. So, SEMrush, Moz, Ahrefs, they all kind of do the same thing, but those are, I have 4 core audits that I do: information architecture, performance, analytics, and search. And then you kind of wrap those into the user audit and the strategic audit. So with those 6 audits, you can kind of get a great baseline for what your potential updates are and what you should be looking at and identifying those gaps, either in persona or in strategy or in, areas of the funnel. So those are the main tools I use.
Brian, how often would you recommend people look at an auditing? Is this an annual thing? Do you do that more often? Do you do it when a problem arises? How would you look at it?
Yep, it's a great question, and we'll do it. Well, so I have a dashboard set up that I use to, and actually it's in the resources guide for the book on epiccontentmarketing.com. There's a Looker Data Studio dashboard that I have. So you can monitor your site performance across all of those different audits on an ongoing basis. So every week I'll go in and look at our site. But then when we go work with, when I go work with another company, I tell them, based on how often they're updating the content, you should do one big audit either during a big redesign or, when you're initially starting to look at your whole web landscape. But then, yeah, at least every 6 months, I like to do them quarterly, in a kind of big way to reevaluate where traffic patterns are backing up and where we're missing things.
I know Julia has a question, but just a really good story. Robert Rose, this is a real life story. He worked with one of the largest tech companies, and they were doing an audit process, and they were having somebody go in. There were thousands and thousands of PDFs that needed to be updated with new branding. And they went through and they were going to have somebody do this by, an individual go through thousands of these things. And luckily Robert was there and his team, and they would go through and say, well, before we update all of these, why don't we see if anyone's using it? Anybody? And they found out that something like 98% of all those PDFs hadn't been looked at in over a year.
Yeah.
And he's like, well, just do the ones that have. You could just throw the other ones out. Nobody needs that. So it's just a great story of it, just a little bit beforehand will save you a lot of time afterward.
Yeah, very
Yeah,
good.
and
Also,
even when you're looking at your site navigation, if you have elements in your navigation that are getting no traffic, take them out of your navigation, put them somewhere else. People don't need to waste that navigation space on, content that no one's looking at.
yeah. Also note in the chat, Rosemary has a blog post on creating content audits, and she echoed your point, Brian, about doing it before a website relaunch. Julie, I see you have your hand up. You want to come off mute and ask your question, please?
Yeah, sure. Joe and Brian, thank you all so much for being here. Yeah, I'm Julia. I'm the co-founder of a startup called Kapwing here in San Francisco. I'm interested in hearing, of all formats that content can come in, why y'all chose a book for sort of like this second edition. And did you consider doing anything else, like, a blog post or a series of blog posts or a YouTube series or something? And I'm also interested in sort of how you think about measuring the performance of the book itself, like how you think about your own kind of like KPIs for this piece of content marketing, essentially.
Sure. I can answer the KPIs really clearly, and that's basically we're looking at the sales of the book and downloads of the book, all those stuff. That's because that's what the performance now, that's the primary. But honestly, if all those people that know that do a book, really what you want to look at is we want to look, okay, how is that leading to an increase in subscribers? Then what are those subscribers ultimately doing? That would be the content marketing initiative side. So Brian and I absolutely, we use this as a revenue generator for us, but more and more we're looking at, okay, we want to drive. Brian has things that you want people to sign up for, and with that addressable audience, I have a couple different newsletters that I'm using to do that. And so that's where you see a lot of the calls to action going to our own things. Now on the book, because we have an initial audience already with that style or that type of format, we thought that was the most natural way to do it. We didn't think that you should do, oh, hey, the second version is going to be audio only, which could have been an option as well, or we could do a YouTube series or whatever. I like the idea of doing a book as a stamp in time. This is what it's at for this purpose. And to be honest, and especially with Brian being in the university environment, my biggest concern is as the more and more I talk to a lot of professors and the university environment, it's still really behind. They're still teaching things that I learned 20 years ago. And I don't think they've updated it as enough. And our goal is to get this into universities so they start using it as a textbook. They're not going to do that with YouTube, but can we sort of make those inroads with a print book? I think that's the opportunity. So that's the hope. The first one did okay. The first one is a textbook in a lot of organizations, so we'll hopefully get the new edition in there. But I'm sure most of you have your own experience. There's not a clear path for a content marketing education still today. And that's why things like Content Marketing World were created, because there's not. So we have to find out secondhand. There may just a few universities where you can get a minor or some kind of an emphasis in content marketing. It's still, a lot of it ends up being social media. So I don't know if that answers your question, Julie, but that's sort of why we intended to do it. Now, once we have the pillar piece of content, which is that book, you've probably seen, Brian, I don't know if you paid attention at all, but it doesn't matter. Brian and I are doing a lot of offshoots of that. We're on a lot of webinars. We're doing a lot of articles. So that pillar piece of content ends up being 40, 50, 60, 70 pieces of content. So that's when we work with an organization and they're trying to say, yeah, we want to do a book. I'm like, okay, great. If your goal is to be the trusted expert over this particular area, a book is a great way to do that. Then from that book, and you have that piece of pillar content, then you have multiple different initiatives that offshoot from that. But that still is the one thing that you can set on somebody's table and say, yeah, this is what we stand for. Brian, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but that would be
Yeah, I mean, when we first started talking about the book, we were talking about, make it a gated blog where you have to buy an NFT, and we were coming up with all these different ideas.
God help us, yeah.
Different ways to deliver it. And, but this was my, first book. So I really wanted it to be a physical hard copy book that I could look at. But really, when we talk about the impact that creating a book has immediately on, setting you up as an expert in the field. I mean, Joe's already well established in this, but when you talk about, measuring KPIs, I have already seen all sorts of, extra consulting work, and, all of the metrics that I track personally around my social measurements have gone off the chart in the last 2 months, as the book has come out, and leading up to the book coming out. I'm getting paid speaking gigs, which I haven't had in, the previous 3 or 4 years that I've been speaking. So those are kind of the KPIs that I'm most interested in as far as measuring the overall impact of the book. And I think the fact that it is a book has more relevance and significance than any other form of content that you can put out as a single piece right now.
Yeah, and Julia, just from all of you on this call are thought leaders in one way, shape, or form. And if you said, well, let's say your problems were, I need more visibility, I'd like more guest blog posts, I would like to do more speaking, I would like to get more webinar invitations, those types of things. Well, the answer to that is probably something that looks like a book. I mean, before my speaking career took off after I wrote my first book. After I started writing more books, you start getting invitations to do all sorts of things that you'd never have the opportunity to do. So it's almost like a gatekeeper. Not having one is an issue. And this depends on what your goal is. If your goal for your startup is to be the leading provider of this, so you can ultimately offer your product or service, you might say, you know what, there's a gap in the marketplace. Nobody's done a book like this. But again, you do the strategy, get yourself there. That may or may not be the answer.
Real good. All right. Thanks, guys. Next up, Tom, you want to come off mute? You have a question?
Sure.
Tom, hey.
Hey, great to see you, Joe. Great to see you, Brian. And, after talking with you, Joe, in the in-person meetup, I ended up acquiring and launching CDP.com for treasure data. So that was kind of like a big play that we did based on content marketing. So
Did it work?
Yeah.
Okay,
it's working
good.
still working.
Awesome. Because if it was bad advice, I would feel horrible about that.
2 stars. No, I'm just kidding. No, it's very good. And I've moved on to Snip Interactive, so we're doing other things. But I did have a question. Some in the B2B space, there are some voices that say, ungate everything, and obviously that's great for SEO, discoverability, ease of access. And then there's others, you get nervous because you still want those leads, you still want those MQLs, you still want, kind of some metrics that show that you're getting traction and contacts. So have you two thought about the gating versus ungating and the extreme ungating, kind of thing?
Yeah, I think about it all the time, because we just had this conversation. We're releasing our 3rd annual research project for the Tilt. We've got some really good findings this year, and I ran it by the team yesterday, and I said, if we gate this thing this year, we could and have it be a subscriber only benefit. I said we could really increase our subscribers, and right now we're doing really well. We're at 22,000 subscribers. We're generating about 1,000 subscribers a month. Things are really starting to heat up. I'm feeling good. I'm like, okay, well let's use this one. And the team was like, then we had to go back to the goals and say, well, why are we doing this? We're doing this because first and foremost, we feel this information, the Tilt Aside, needs to get out into the universe to as many people as possible. That is the first and primary goal. And they said, you're right. That means that I should not gate it. And I'm going, wah, but they had to remind me that's the goal. Absolutely. And I have to focus on that goal first and foremost over. And we believe that if it gets, if you look at we've got some stuff on gating and not gating from David Meerman. Scott always has great examples and says, it ultimately ends up driving more subscribers when he ungates his stuff. It's just harder to track. So you have to look at it and really look at all the data, as Brian would say, and say, where can you make where can you make some inferences that this is driving more subscribers, more MQLs, whatever the case is. So in general, if you look at all your content, you'd say 99% of my content is ungated, and you have a couple big lead magnets, lead generations that ultimately, probably in this case, especially from a B2B side, lead to a regular communication vehicle like a newsletter. So that would be the way that I would look at it. That's almost the B2B model to a
Yeah.
T, actually.
Yeah, and you could throw on a guide on top of that and say, oh, here's the survey data, here's a guide to help you get started. So that could be the
Yeah.
1-2
But
punch.
but just so you know, just kind of back to the conversation, the way that, so I got a little bit of my way. I said, okay, we'll have this thing be free and everybody gets out, but we're gonna create a little, hey, if you want 10 charts that were not included in the original, whatever, we're gonna do a little bolt on where it's all free, but then there's a little bit of an extra, to your point, guide where you get a little, you're not going to get the downloads that you get before, but if you increase the amount of audience that would see this, because people are going to freely pass it around and they're not going to pass around anything that's gated.
Yep.
Then secondarily, you have that lead magnet in the free guide.
Yep. Makes
So.
sense. Thank you.
Good. Answer your question. Next up, I see Larry. You want to come off mute? You got a question?
Yeah, this feels like coming home to warm apple pie. I'm hearing things that I've talked about and written about and believed in very deeply for a long, long time. And it's certainly not what I expected to hear in a content marketing webinar. So it's really nice to hear. And I apologize. I was with a client, so I was a little late getting started. I've been writing my whole life, and I just wrote my very first book, and it's in the process of being printed right now. And my goal is, and I have very great clarity about who my target market is and all of those details. That's one of the things I consult on, and I take my own advice. And one of my goals is to get this research that is encapsulated in my book in as many hands as humanly possible. Well, so if you give the book away free, it has no value. So it's an audiobook, it's an ebook, and it's a physical book. So I'm clear on all that stuff. The gap for me is, how do I go from there to speaking? Because the most powerful way for me to share this information, in my experience, historically speaking, is orally in front of a group of people.
Mm-hmm.
And what I heard Brian talk about, and Joe, you kind of alluded to this, the mere act of producing a book and having it available led to speaking opportunities. Connect that for me. What do I have to proactively do in order to, specifically related to finding those opportunities to present this information, not sell anything. I don't care about selling anything. I don't care how much money I make on the book. If I could give it away, I would, because I know that business will come. How do I connect those two?
Did you want to, I have a take on this. Do you want to talk, Brian?
Go ahead. I've got.
Yeah, you have it because you're doing this. You've been working on this for a while because you've been speaking at a lot of events, and then now it's sort of culminating. The book has been released, and you're everywhere, and you're getting all sorts of invitations. So, Larry, thank you first of all. Congratulations on the book. That's a big deal. Anybody that can do that, you're a superhero. Now, prepare for the fact that inquiries will come. So what I would love to see you do is, on your website, wherever your call to action is, which is on your website, you should have some kind of thing on the navigation that says speaking. You should have a thing on the navigation that says some kind of speaker reel. If you don't have the video of it, make a video of it, so that when people go, because if people like what you have to say, the first thing they're going to do, oh, hey, I would like to have Larry speak. This is a dead end for 90% of authors. They go to their page, they don't have a speaking page, then they don't have, here's the 6 things that Larry can talk about, and then have a bright, shiny picture of the book as well. Because a lot of people won't accept you to speak at their event unless you're an author. Don't have to be a published author, a traditionally published author. It's just a book. It could be an ebook even. So put that on there and prepare for that. If you do that, you will be 90% farther than most other people that don't have that. Have your contact me for speaking engagements right on there. The second thing is, I got this question the other day. There's like, Joe, I want to speak at these events. I want to get more speaking. I'm like, oh, get more speaking. I can give you more speaking, but what do you want to speak at? Who are you trying to target? So what I'd like you to do is, for all the events that you feel, Larry, that you should be speaking at, you need to make a list right now, and it should be a 12-month list of all the events that are out there. And then from those dates, you want to move back and say, when are the call for speakers for those, so that you're on there. So even if you want to get paid or don't get paid or whatever. We're not into that yet, but you want to be considered. Make sure you go and fill out those call for speakers, because they might not reach out past that and you don't know. So if you have that, and because they're going to ask you on that, they want your sizzle reel, and they want to know your speaking page and all that. So you'll have to fill that out anyways. You do that, Larry, and you got some people that are interested in your book, you'll start getting speaking inquiries. So Brian,
So before you respond, I have a couple of follow-up questions, if I may, for Joe. What is your recommended length and framework or model or structure for the speaker / sizzle reel? And I have crystal clear demographic criteria for my target market and my reader, but it's not industry specific. How do I find those speaking opportunities that you're telling me I need to make a list of?
So I would say 45 seconds to 2 minutes is your sizzle reel. Something on the front says who you are, what your focus is, contact information on the back, make it simple. And then the second part is you're going to have to choose. My advice would be you need to choose where you think this will have the most impact from an industry standpoint, because it's like with our event, Creator Economy Expo. I can say, hey, we're good for all content creators. Come one, come all. But as you know, if it's for everybody, it's for nobody. Where's our bright shining star? Marketing and business people.
You've answered my question. I appreciate it. What I'm hearing is, do what I know I need to do. There's no magic bullet.
No magic bullet. Yeah.
But you go back to the sizzle reel. Who I am. What was the thing you said should be in there?
Larry, let's do this. I'll put my I'll do it
Perfect.
in a second. I'll do it on
Thank you.
Brian's second. I'll put my email in the chat.
Thank you.
And then send me a note and I'll send you some examples, and then you can just look at them.
Thank you.
Yeah, you got it. Absolutely.
Excellent.
Brian, do you have anything
Wonderful.
else on that one? You good?
Yeah. The only thing I would add is, don't only think about in-person speaking. I mean, in-person speaking is great. There's no better way to connect and network with people, but look at podcasts that have that same target audience that you have, or that have a lot of crossover. So I have like Joe said, I got a spreadsheet with all the conferences that I want to speak at, when their submission dates are, links to it. So, and reminders to myself. I've got the same spreadsheet for podcasts and virtual meetings that I want to speak in front of. In the United States, there's over like 7,000 meetings every day. And every one of those meetings, whether it's, local meetings, business groups looking for speakers to come and present and be featured. So there's a lot of opportunities. It's just a matter of figuring out which ones you want to target, making a list of them, and then just starting to reach out. And once you have a book, it's very easy to say, if you want, I'll send you a copy of my book, or if, depending on how many you're doing, a digital copy of the book, so that you can see it before we actually, launch into the meeting. So
Real good.
make a list.
Real good. Thanks, Brian and Joe. And Larry, there's a lot in the chat here for you. Lori, longtime meetup, OG, original gangster, I think, Lori, chats about the, what is it, Lori? The National Speakers Association, the Northern California chapter. She's on the board. I think you're in NorCal, Larry, right? You're nearby?
Yeah, and we get people from around the country. And Larry, I don't know if you remember, I'm new myself, but anyway, we have all these events. Check it out. It's in the chat, nsanc.org.
Great recommendation. Yeah.
And then
Thank you.
I made yet another plug, Larry, for Spark Toro. I'm a big fanboy of what Rand is doing. It's not an SEO tool, it's an audience research tool. So when Brian says to you, well, get on the podcast where your audience are, and you think, well, what do I know? Use Spark Toro to find the audience you're looking for and find out what media they're consuming. And it's just a wealth of information. We're trying to get them on the meetup as well. We got about 5 minutes to go. I want to see if there's maybe time for one more question before we give away some books, Dennis. Is that a good agenda? Anybody else have a question for Joe or Brian? I also see a plug for, thanks, Joe, for Andrew Davis having some great material on the link there as well. Any other questions for these guys?
Yeah, Andrew has a great newsletter on becoming a better speaker. fantastic stuff.
Good. Okay, well, if there's no more questions, and this will be recorded for playback, maybe we get to the giveaway part. Dennis, are we recording that or should we wrap up?
I want to wrap up, but everyone stay on. Rich, why don't you wrap up and then we'll announce the winners.
Well, using your Zoom applause and or hands applause, thank you, Joe and Brian, for a great presentation today. Thank you for your leadership, your work on Epic Content Marketing 2nd edition. It won't be too long. We'll have you back for 3rd edition, right?
Oh God. I
more
don't know,
years.
but
Did you raise your hand for that?
the Bay Area meetup is the best meetup on the planet, I think. And I've said this many times. I will continue to. You all have been so supportive. I can't thank you enough. It's just been wonderful. Now Brian gets to feel the glow of the Bay Area meetup group. It's just wonderful.
Thank you both. We'll curtail the